And we are back with more News Talk Saga 960. So very glad you could join us on this edition of the Mark Petrona Show. Well, BJ Dichter, of course, a regular on our show, not only likes to talk about Bitcoin and the importance, at least according to many, and I would dare say an increasing number of people, of gravitating out of the fiat currencies and at least having some money allocated in the digital space where they can access it. And of course, nothing made that more prevalent in terms of the clarity and the need to do this than what happened when the government of Canada, with the cooperation of the banks, froze people's assets, seized their assets, made it so it was impossible for some people even to gain access to their own money to buy groceries for their kids. That's how outrageous it all was. That was a massive wake-up call and led to billions of dollars leaving the country when people realized that we have little Hugo Chavez running Canada. Now, of course, the battle for freedom continues as far as the trucker convoy, as I've stated on this show many times. The convoy continues to live rent-free in Justin Trudeau's head, continues to preoccupy these people as they see more and more protests, as people come out and push back against the draconian measures of this government, not the least of which, of course, are the travel mandates. There are still literally millions of Canadians who cannot leave the country by air, by ferry, by train, simply because of their vaccine status. And now we have BJ Dichter on the line to weigh in on all of this stuff, including, of course, this latest decision, the bail hearing of Tamara Lich, one of the organizers, who basically said, look, I'm allowed to, collect an award, a Freedom Award, the George Jonas Award. And there was this move by the Crown to have her thrown back into prison, and it blew up in their face. Benjamin, welcome to the show.
It blew up in their face gloriously. How are you?
I'm excellent. This is good news. I can't help but, part of me thinks that it felt a little too pat in the way it happened. Like it's almost like somebody said, all right, give them a win, let them keep her out. Almost like is the government getting nervous about these measures now that appear to be aimed at crushing freedoms? Are they getting to the point where they say, every time we do this, protesters show up in force and they tell us where to go. Maybe we better back off. Do you think the government is getting the message?
It's hard to tell. In terms of what happened yesterday with the court, it was very evident that the judge was not a supporter of the Freedom Convoy and the protest. He explained that. But he still gave a ruling that was rooted in law, that's a good sign. That's a sign that we haven't gone completely off a cliff yet, although we're heading in that direction. In terms of the government getting worried, I'm not sure, but they should. And I'll tell you why. Last night, for example, we had a Twitter space that ended up being almost 4.5 hours long. There were hundreds of people in there who were supportive of the Freedom Convoy and protesting, and from all over. And one guy in particular, I remember towards the end, he said to me, I used to be completely oblivious to what was going on. I had no idea about the World Economic Forum and the Trudeau government's association with it. I thought rebel news was, fake news or extremist stuff, whatever. And then this convoy came to Ottawa, and like everybody else, I thought, what are they protesting for? Whatever, it is what it is, and just kind of ignored it. And then Prime Minister Blackface, or as they call him in South America, I've learned, Fidelito, little Fidel, decided to go in the direction of Banana Republic and target the protesters, make it illegal to protest, bring in riot police, and then freeze people's bank accounts. And he said to me, that woke me up. Once I saw that, I realized, okay, I need to understand what the other side is saying now, because something is very wrong here. And he said, I went down this trajectory of all these things, these platforms that I tried to ignore because I bought into the narrative. I said, okay, well, let me just see what they're saying. Let me listen to their crazy, commentary, whatever. And he said, I realized very quickly that, wow, these people aren't extremists. They, whether we agree or not, they're just trying to go by the objective facts, and they're All they were looking for is to remove mandates, remove the COVID passport apps. And I've had my government and my media lying to me this entire time. And it was wonderful to hear somebody comment openly about that, about their shift. And it's because of Trudeau. It's because of his authoritarianism and his extremism that's caused regular centrist people to recoil, take a step back, and say, wait a minute, something's not right here. So it's great. So I hope they continue to do it.
One interesting part of the decision, Benjamin, was that there was a request by Lich's lawyer to have her restrictions in terms of getting on social media lifted. So, yes, she won the right to stay out of prison. But when her lawyer said, you know what, she should also be allowed on social media, the judge said, well, no, that's maybe a bridge too far, suggesting that Leach is in her late 40s, and therefore she should be able to use her social skills built up before the advent of the internet. To me, I mean, I don't want to be picky about the decision, but that's bizarre. I mean, the technology has changed, but since she is a pre-internet baby, that somehow she should be prohibited, or she can be prohibited from using social media now. That made no sense to me. Was that a red flag for you?
No, Viva Fry was actually broadcasting during the judge's ruling and explaining it and interpreting it. And we got to that part, and he said, "Oh, okay, the judge is being funny now. The judge is making a joke." And
Are you
saying,
serious? That was a joke?
Yeah, he was being kind of played, and judges and lawyers sometimes do that in court. You see that frequently, and he was doing a little bit of the, I know it's difficult, I know you may not like it, but we're both old, and we were able to function before social media, and you should be able to for now as well. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't agree with the assessment myself. I understand your point, but I don't think the judge in that case was being political. I think he was just going along with the previous ruling. And although I disagree with it, I think he was a little bit tongue in cheek as well. At least his comments were.
Okay, so what's the deal with the award? Do you know if she's going to be actually allowed to receive the award legally without being afraid of being thrown into prison?
I don't know. You hear people say both things. She can accept the award, and she can't accept the award. The problem is in the wording of the ruling, they explain that she can't um, go to certain protests. She can't advocate for anti-COVID at anti-COVID events or protests, that sort of stuff. So, okay, well, she can't. Let's assume she cannot go to an anti-COVID event. Okay, well, is it a far stretch to say the government would interpret that as being as an anti-COVID event? I'm willing to bet they would push that, unless the government continues to get the pushback that they're getting from regular people, despite what the fake news media is trying to tell people. And I've mentioned before in a bunch of these spaces, I've been in a couple of countries since the convoy. I have not. I'm sorry, that's a lie. I've met one person that was in opposition to the convoy. Everybody else is in favor of it. And in terms of Canada, you know who's against the convoy? People who live in downtown Toronto, the people who live in downtown Ottawa, maybe downtown Montreal, and downtown Vancouver. Everyone else supports it. So they're going to have to learn, much like in the U.S., that New York and Los Angeles aren't the voice of the country. Same goes for Canada.
I want to play you this clip from Prime Minister Trudeau, or as you said, Fidelito. Actually, it wasn't. It's not just the people in Colombia who call him Fidelito, little Fidel.
Yeah.
It's actually what I like to think of as Justin's half brother
Yeah, Kyle.
in Cuba, Raul. I think it was Raul.
Oh, Raul.
Yes.
Yeah. Raul said he's my half brother. He came out, issued a press release, and said, "Yes, he's my half brother."
Yes, he did, and so he referred to him as his Fidelito, his little brother.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to point out this clip. Now, I want you to listen to not only the answer that Trudeau gives, but I really want you to listen carefully to the question, because it really shows just how far gone these zealots, these Trudeau cultists in the media are. Because rather than saying, "Hey, these protesters are out here," how do you respond to what they're saying? They want freedom. They don't want to be subjected to the boot of the state. Listen to what she says. Listen to how she phrases this question.
Where do we draw the line between acceptable discourse and freedom of speech and outright harassment of public figures? And what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, it's all about harassment. It's you folks. You're harassing these poor people, these poor politicians. The question almost seems to be designed to have Justin come out and sound like the reasonable one. Let's listen.
Last night in BC, hundreds of people, mostly racialized Canadians, came out to exercise their democratic rights to support the political party that they believed in, and were faced with harassment, racist insults, threats of violence, as they participated in something that is fairly fundamental as a freedom for all Canadians to be able to make their voices heard and impact on the way our democracy unfolds.
Wait a minute, isn't it also the right of protesters under our charter to come out and protest? This guy says, well, the people who came out to the fundraiser, they are exercising their democratic rights to support me. Those people over there are bad. They're a bunch of racists. They're evil. They're not real. They're like the fringe groups, right? So here it is, demonizing protests again. To me, Benjamin, this is an offshoot of the Convoy once again. The Convoy really, there were protests before that. The Convoy set it off, and ever since then, wherever these people go, there's somebody getting in their face. To me, that's an expression of democracy. What say you?
I think you're trying to torture me by forcing me to listen to this nonsense.
I can play more of it. There's a lot more of that clip that I didn't even play.
It's always the same word salad. Like, you take a bunch of words, you throw it into a box: diversity, freedom, democracy, racialized, hate, and you mix it all together. You start pulling out words, and it's meaningless. I don't even pay attention to what he says at this point. I really could care less. His career is over. It's on the sunset. They all realize that. He's polling 15% approval rating amongst even his supporters. They're embarrassed by him. So if he had any dignity whatsoever, he would resign. So he needs this. They need to rewrite history and build yet another straw man, another boogeyman that doesn't exist, to say about, racialized Canadian, we're for freedom. Like, you know what? We all our eyes work. We all saw the police beating innocent protesters who kept chanting peace, love, unity, and freedom. And they kept doubling down, and now it's going to haunt them. And it's only going to get worse. They're trying to rewrite history. And that's why there's so many people on social media engaged online, having group chats, posting, writing articles. I have a Substack. Follow me, bjdichter.substack.com, where we talk about a lot of this stuff, because we're not going to allow them to write history. If this were 40 years ago, where media was only went top down in one direction, then yeah, they probably would be successful in building this narrative. The scary truckers, right? But because media is now is bidirectional now, it goes bottom up as well. They're going to be unable to do that, and we got all the time in the world. There's hundreds of thousands of people around the world who support the right to protest, something the left used to love, by the way. And what we're seeing is the left is morphing into the straw man of right wingers they always claim to fight against. That's what they've become. And that's why they no longer support the right to protest. So, I mean, his career's at the end. Is he going to win the next election? I think probably not. Even if he did, It will be a slow grind, minority governments. At some point, the NDP is going to realize, hey, we're actually a different party. This schmuck who's running our party, let's get rid of him. And maybe we should start advocating for workers again. That sort of thing. It's only a matter of time.
Benjamin Dichter joining us on Saga 960 and the Mark Petronas Show. Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack there, and including the role of the media in all this. I mean, you heard the way that question was phrased. It was like, you need to go after these protesters, the same people who have gone out of their way to support the likes of Antifa will fight you guys hammer and tong. And the word freedom now they've tried to make that synonymous with racism. I mean, it's absolutely bizarre. We've got this story in Blacklock's Reporter lamenting anti-media trolling. A federally subsidized report has complained that media are now subject to online abuse from Canadian social media users and Freedom Convoy sympathizers. Authors stopped short of endorsing federal censorship of Twitter and Facebook. Quote, "We are holding this event here on Parliament Hill, a place where so many journalists have been exposed to trauma and harassment." I don't know, it's hard to feel overly sorry for them. I mean, I've been in circumstances in my journalistic career where, yeah, it's been pretty traumatic. I've come out of it with, not too many scrapes, thankfully, but at the end of the day, that's part of the job. And if you're going to take a position that is decidedly pro-government time and time again, you shouldn't be too surprised when more and more Canadians start getting in your face.
Yeah, I think the prerequisite to work for the fake news media, in most cases, there are still some good people. You and I know some of them. But in general, you have to be a weak, feeble-minded weasel who does nothing but promulgate a victim narrative. That's it. They're not journalists. They're activists. And you'll see that many of them, you'll notice, they don't go to journalism school. They go to public relations school. And what do you learn in public relations? You learn how to lie. That's all you do. You learn how to lie, and you learn how to spin narratives. So it's narrative journalism on steroids. That's what these people are. And, we've all worked difficult jobs. I think that's difficult. Try being a trucker. You think people give you a hard time being a journalist? Go be a trucker. You see how much crap people give you. That's just the nature of life and being an adult. But we are living in this society right now where we have a subsect of the population, and Justin Trudeau is one of them, where you have children in adult bodies. They've never had any sort of struggle. They've never had to contemplate, how do I pay my bills? How do I pay my electricity? How do I put food on my table? Because they're spoiled. That's why they're all upper middle class. And they never want to talk about, working class versus, like the old socialists used to, for example. Now it's just about race. But because if we talk about economic status, they're all the wealthiest class. They're a bunch of spoiled weasels with silver spoons in their mouth. And that's why I personally don't care what any of them say. Like, I keep hearing about this guy. What's this guy's name? Coin something? Whatever his name. Him and the other guy who works at all the political parties. I can't remember his name is. People bring up their names in the media. I'm like, who cares? Like, why would you care what this irrelevant slug says? It's completely irrelevant. Anyways, they're shopping for relevancy, and they're all children.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've come out and I've said, look, it's time for the managers of some of these news organizations to purge their organizations of this woke disease. And we're seeing elements of that happening in other corporations. We saw the debacle, what happened with CNN Plus. They had invested hundreds of millions of dollars in this organization. It collapsed in a heap within a couple of weeks, not even at 10,000 subscribers. I mean, we've seen the audience numbers at the CBC, the news, collapse. And so these news organizations have become so woke and tiresome that people are bailing out. What happened with Netflix? That company saw its share price, its capitalization, its market capitalization cut by more than half. And they looked at their staffing, they looked at their content and said, this is garbage. People don't want to watch a bunch of woke people preach to them about what's politically correct and the fact that they're a bunch of racists and homophobes, and here's how you should behave. Nobody considers that entertaining. What did Netflix do? They got rid of 150 of these woke people, and they told the rest, look, if you're that preoccupied with being politically correct and woke, maybe Netflix is not the place for you. I would extend that same attitude to these news organizations and appeal to the likes of Bell Media and the rest of them and say, look, you've got to go into your newsrooms and you got to get rid of these people. You got to get rid of them. They are a cancer. They're not doing journalism. They're pushing this woke ideology on people who have no interest in being exposed to it. So I'm hoping they listen. I don't imagine that they're going to be too interested in hearing what I have to say. But the smart ones are going to say, you know what, maybe he's onto something. Do you see any kind of cultural shift in the next year or two of maybe more and more companies saying, this stuff sucks, it's bad for business, we got to make some changes or else we're going to go down with the ship?
I don't know. There's a guy I'm friends with in the United States by the name of James Altucher, is a pretty well-known guy. And James used to go on CNBC, MSNBC all the time. He's a hedge fund guy, comedian, podcaster, like a very interesting individual, but a brilliant guy. And he explained to me why he stopped going on CNBC. And you know why he did? And people need to understand this. You and I, for example, right now, we're just having an open conversation. None of this is scripted. That's just, shooting our ideas and what do we think, how do we think the world is panning out? But when you go on to CNBC or MSNBC or all of these corporate media channels, most of them, what happens is you'll always notice they're wearing an earpiece. Why? That's because that's for the producers. And what the producers do is they tell people when to weigh in. James explained this to me. He just got sick and tired of this. He'd say, he would be on a panel and somebody would say something about whatever investment, or, he was into Bitcoin for a while. He's, a big hedge fund manager. They'd say somebody would make a point and James would hear in his ear, okay, James, counter his point, and you respond and tell him why he's wrong. And she was like, well, sometimes I didn't think he's wrong. Like, I agree. It's just theater. It's nothing but nonsense. So when you think you're watching the news, you're just watching the equivalent of a reality TV show, but on a news set. And I'm sure you've seen a little bit of that or have some sort of exposure to that. And it's just caught up with them to the point that because we now have independent media and we can see people from the grassroots who build media companies, National Telegraph is a good example of that, where it's just honest, there may be bias, there may be a perspective, but at least it's not scripted. At least it's an attempt to be direct and honest. And that is what's resonating with people. That's also why during the Freedom Convoy for the press conferences, the ones that the official ones where the fake news media was not allowed, I was able to say, listen, we're not going to do a 15-minute scripted press conference with one question and one follow-up. We're just going to sit here for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, however long you want, and we're going to make sure all your questions are answered to your satisfaction, and that's it. And you know what? That really resonated with people. It's very powerful for all of us in the room.
Where are we headed, do you think? I mean, you've spoken about the fact that you think Trudeau is on his last legs. We've seen a big push. It looks like Pierre Poilievre is headed for victory, although you never know, because who knows, the Chaudet camp may be able to harness the power of thousands of Liberals to sign up. 2-minute Tories support him just to keep Poilievre out. I mean, clearly, Liberals are afraid of Poilievre, those who aren't coming on side. I've spoken to people like Dan McTague, who thinks that a lot of Liberals are starting to listen to things that Pierre Poilievre is saying. I mean, where are we headed in the next 2 or 3 years? I mean, is Canada going to be moving in favor of more freedom or more totalitarianism, which is being pushed by the likes of Justin Trudeau? Because now we're already seeing the struggle here where the airlines, through this organization, this international organization, are coming out and say, look, enough of these mandates. You've got to stop this because it's causing all sorts of delays and problems at the airports. And it's your problem. It's your mandates. But the government, stubborn as a mule as usual, holds on to these mandates because that that's part of who they are, right? Punish people we don't like, hold out a carrot for those that we do like, and then pile on even more mandates later on. What's your sense of how it's going to go?
Well, I think stubbornness is not a virtue. Justin Trudeau doesn't seem to have learned that, and as well as his whole inner circle. And as somebody once said, I'm not the intellectual my father was. That person's name is Justin Trudeau. I think we are going to be headed for, things are going to get worse for a little bit. And then I think what we're going to see on the horizon is almost, an Enlightenment 2.0. I can already see it coming from the Freedom Convoy, despite what the fake news wants to say. I was interacting with people across the political spectrum, people who were NDP members in the past or current Liberal parties. I was dealing with some people in the Liberal Party who had informed me there were about 30 MPs about to throw Justin Trudeau under the bridge. So I think the pendulum always swings to the extremes. And then once it gets challenged, it gets pushed back to the center. So I think Trudeau's on his last legs. He is an embarrassment all over the world. The only people who haven't gotten the memo seem to live in downtown Toronto or downtown Ottawa, just about. Everybody, all of the other, over 7.5 billion people understand he's a disaster. And it's just a matter of time that he's out. And I think once we get somebody else in power, most of all these people who have gotten so political and so politically engaged will go back to not caring about politics anymore. Once we get back to a more, boring bureaucrat, political type person in office, and we abandon this era of celebrity politicians, I think you're going to see a shift back to life how it used to be. But it's going to be a little bit of a struggle before then.
Thank you, Benjamin. How do people support your organization, your work?
Go to follow me on Substack, bjdichter.substack.com. Follow me on Twitter, bjdichter, and it's a DICHTER. And there's going to be some more stuff coming down the pipeline. There's also online on Twitter, Honking for Freedom, honking the number 4 freedom, which will be related to an initiative that a whole bunch of people have been working very hard on putting together since the Freedom Convoy. It's not another convoy, so all the communists in the government, just calm down. There's no more convoys. Don't worry. But to further specific initiatives around the fight for freedom and reinstating our constitutional rights and freedoms.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Benjamin. Really appreciate it.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
Benjamin Dichter, BJ Dichter. And that's it for this edition of the Mark Petrone Show. We're going to take a break, actually. Back with more on News Talk Saga 960 and the Mark Petrone Show after this.